Good morning, I'm Angelo Castro III.
I'm Angela, and we are the Castros.
We bring you the news.
And the views that make you think.
Sometimes we agree.
Sometimes we don't.
This is News and Views.
And here are today's headlines.
Suspected human bones have been found in Taal Lake during the technical site assessment.
The U.S. imposition of a 20% tariff on Philippine exports has sparked concern, according to Presidential Advisor Frederick Go, who noted officials are headed to Washington to discuss the matter.
The palace says Vice President Sara Duterte does not need an attack dog. This follows remarks by the OVP's new spokesperson.
Mattel has introduced its first Barbie doll with type 1 diabetes, marking a big step in inclusivity.
First in the news, suspected human bones have been found in Taal Lake, a possible breakthrough in the case of the missing Sabongeros. Here's the report.
Authorities may have just found a major lead in the case of the missing Sabongeros. During a technical site assessment at Taal Lake on Thursday, a team from the PNP CIDG and Philippine Coast Guard recovered a white sack containing what appears to be burned human bones. The Justice Department confirms this discovery came even before the official technical dives could begin, which are scheduled for Friday, July 11. The DOJ says the next steps are to formally determine if the remains are human and to conduct DNA testing to see if they match any of the families of the missing individuals. Prior to the discovery, authorities had been scoring sections of Taal Lake in Laurel and Talisay, Batangas in search of human remains. DOJ Assistant Secretary Mico Clavano says this is part of a technical site assessment. The goal? To study the lake's depth and condition before the first official dive.
Dahil po sa mga equipment na pinapahiram po sa atin, we are quite confident that we can get a good picture of what it looks like down there. If not just the depth, pati yung map ng ground makita na po natin.
The site assessment is based on leads from Julie Dondon Patidongan alias Totoy, who pointed to the lake as a burial site. Totoy earlier clarified he did not personally witness the killings or disposal of the bodies. But what if no corpses are recovered? The DOJ says it still has other pieces of evidence that could back a strong murder case.
So we do hope to see remains that will match the DNA of those missing cockfight enthusiasts. However, even if we do not find the bodies, what we have to prove is the fact of death. No? That is what is important in a murder case.
Over at the CIDG in Camp Crame, relatives of missing cockfight enthusiasts reiterate their demand for justice. One victim's mother said she wants to refile complaints they were urged to withdraw earlier. The case had been settled, but she insists it was done in bad faith.
Balita po noon na ganun nga po nagkabayaran. Siya daw pang nakatanggap po. Yung asawa niya dati. Kasi masakit sa isang magulang na gano'n ang nangyari sa anak ko po. Kaya hanggang hindi po siya maalis sa puso ko, sa isip ko, araw-gabi po.
She also pleaded with policemen tagged by Patidongan in the case to cooperate with the investigation. This is also the plea of other relatives of the missing Sabongeros.
Sabi po ng whistleblower, tinurn-over daw po sa pulis. Pakiusap naman po, ibalik na lang kung siya ay buhay pa. Pero maski na masakit man tanggapin, kung isa siya sa mga pinatay niyo, wala na po po magagawa.
Hindi magandang nakaladkad yung mga pulis o kung sino mga government agencies dito na nagpagamit at para lang maisakatuparan yung mga gusto nila.
Yun. So, hinahanap
development.
I-clarify lang bones pa lang ang sinasabi at sa
Possible
sako.
bones?
Bones talaga, but possible human remains, but check pa nila first if it's of human origin. Kung human bones, then they will babanggain nila sa DNA. Sa any of the family members ng mga Sabongeros.
Missing Sabongeros.
Oo.
So sabi nga nila, it's race against typhoon dahil typhoon season na. So mostly, ang gagawin nilang retrieval dyan ay umaga. Kasi usually, di ba, medyo hapon, paghapon niya na palakasan ng alon, ng hangin. at saka ng ulan. So, yun ang tsaka mahirap kasi maputik sa ilalim. And I remember kasi sinabi ni DOJ Secretary Rimulya that they'll be asking help, assistance, no, technical assistance from Japan, especially yung mapping ng lake bed doon sa Taal. Pero
ito na yung mapping.
yes, pero they're asking also Japan. So for now kasi ang nangyari diyan PCG muna yung Navy 'di ba? So pero ewan ko kung tutuloy ang Japan to assist us in that
Ang sabi
operation.
ng DOJ spokes kasi, what they're doing now is, hindi pa yung dive, no?
Not yet.
And they're testing the equipment that was lent to them. I don't know if that was Japanese equipment already.
Not yet.
Anyway, whoever lent them the equipment daw, kasi they have equipment that
Sa
came
Navy.
in. No, pero may nagpahiram daw na equipment sa kanila, new equipment na hindi pa nila kabisado, and they're using that to test yung depth ng Taal Lake, yung distance, yung murkiness, type of water, and then pag na-assess nila, then they will go in and dive. Pero during this testing, nakita nila yung sako ng buto.
That's 10 meters away from the shoreline.
Medyo malayo-layo yun, 10 meters.
Tsaka yung iba syempre kasi ang bilis di ba? Siguro kasi sabi nung iba, meron daw mga yung sandbag para yung pampabigat para hindi siya lumutang. So we will see kung ano pa yung magiging update nung kanilang operation dyan, and make sure na we want to ask also kung paano nila sinisecure yung area to make sure nobody can tamper whatever evidence is there in the lake, 'di ba? Kasi sabi nga ng PNP, there are possible other locations at alam na nila yon, pero right now they're not discussing it in public, pero they have secured the area already.
Kung saan yung tinuro?
Oo, yung mga other body disposal na location.
Kasi I'm sure historically, madaming mga bodies dyan, drowning victims or victims of other crimes, di ba? So that's why kailangan ibangga nila sa next of kin.
Yeah. So, sobrang lawak niya. So, saan ka magsisimula? Pero sabi nga nila, like yesterday we talked about it, they will start muna doon sa area kung saan merong contract supposedly allegedly nung area niya, fish pond niya.
Fish pond area.
Diba? Oo,
fish
para
pond.
doon daw talaga. Parang ginawang negosyo na, sige, dito nyo i-dump yung yung mga napapatay nyo. But we will see, of course, kung ano pa yung magiging update nung balita na yan. And also, yung mga pamilya doon, diba, syempre, iniisip din natin na para sa kanila, sige, kung patay sila, gusto naman namin sila mabigyan ng proper burial.
Sa closure.
Oo.
Closure. Pero ito next, interesting to. Labanan din to.
Oh yes, oo. Malacanang insists Vice President Sara Duterte does not need an attack dog. Palace Press Officer Undersecretary Dela Castro said the Vice President is fully capable of speaking for herself and does not need anyone to go on the offensive. This comes after the appointment of Attorney Ruth Castelo as the new spokesperson for the Office of the Vice President.
VP Sara doesn't need anymore an attack dog. Hindi niya na po kailangan ng isang attack dog. So, you know what I mean.
Castelo, a former DTI Undersecretary, said she was instructed to highlight positive news and the accomplishments of the OVP. She also denied that she was appointed to politicize her position.
I am not an attack dog. So, not being an attack dog, I will not go on the offensive. I will just report.
3 of the 21 Filipino seafarers aboard the MV Eternity Sea were confirmed dead after a missile attack by Houthi rebels in the Red Sea. Department of Migrant Workers Under Secretary Bernard Olalia said the crew members were killed in the initial missile strike and did not drown. He added that the department has already notified the victims' families and is coordinating the necessary support. Olalia also urged Filipino seafarers to avoid the area and reminded them of their right of refusal, which allows them to decline deployment to high-risk zones without penalty. Meanwhile, Migrant Workers Secretary Hans Kakdak said 3 more Filipino seafarers from MV Eternity Sea have been rescued, bringing the total to 8.
Bibigyan natin ng warning lahat ng mga seafarers natin. Nasasabihin natin, wag kayong maglalayag sa Red Sea kasi may kaguluhan. Bawal kayong lumayag doon. Kaya meron kaming tinatawag na right of first refusal. Kapag ang barko ay pupunta doon, may karapatan kayo na wag sumakay, may karapatan kayo na bumaba, may karapatan kayo na tumanggi. At yun po ang bilin natin sa lahat ng manning agency.
Yan, tsaka pag may appointment ka daw sa Red Sea or Gulf of Aden, if gusto mo, may mga waiver ka pipirmahan
Yes.
and may ano ka, may hazard pay.
Oo. And then based daw dun sa initial findings nila upon their investigation, may violation talagang ginawa itong manning agency and its principal because
Walang declaration.
Oo, walang declaration. Tsaka kasi may requirement from 2024 pa na order ng DMW to submit yung mga proper requirements nung kanilang passage, yung planned routes before sila pumunta, especially dun sa area ng Red Sea at saka Gulf of Aden. And make sure na alam nung mga crew kung saan sila pupunta at talagang ipinapaliwanag sa kanila yung risk nung pupuntahan nila. So parang nakakita nila upon the investigation, walang ganung nangyari.
Okay. Kung nag-misdeclare sila ng route, yun, ibang malaking kaso yun. Pero kung may prior declaration at may signed waiver, yun ang ano. Kasi usually may double or usually triple pay yan eh.
And this is not the first time na nangyari ito na may mga kasama tayong mga Filipino na na-attack ng mga rebel groups dyan sa karagatan, 'di ba? So that's why a lot of people are saying baka naman pwedeng ihinto muna yung pagpapadala ng mga seafarers dyan until ma-organize talaga at alam natin susunod yung mga manning agencies doon sa regulations na tinatakda natin.
I remember we were talking to, I think, early this year or it was last year, about a different conflict pero sa area na yan as well. Ang sabi kasi sa atin, of course, they're dissuading daw and may mga penalties, pero hindi daw outright ban. Ang panawagan kasi ng ibang Filipinos, why don't you ban it muna para wala nang option ng Filipino because at the expense of government kung may nangyayari.
Kasi ibang Filipino, I'm not saying all, but others na seafarers
will take the risk.
Will take the risk kasi mas malaki ata yung bayad, etc. But we will see kung ano pa yung magiging ma-update dyan kasi may ibang balita din ng ibang nawawala na hinahanap pa rin. Baka daw kasi na-kidnap din upon the attack. But we don't have confirmed information on that yet.
Baka pag na-kidnap, i-ransom pa nila yun.
Right. Alright, we'll be back with more stories after the break. Keep it here on One News. Good morning. You're still watching News and Views here on One News.
In a few weeks, the Senate reconvenes as an impeachment court, and Senator Risa Hontiveros is drawing a clear line. The court's jurisdiction is not up for debate. Mobile journalist Merimon Reyes with the report.
In 3 weeks, the 20th Congress is set to formally open and expected to take on pending matters such as the impeachment trial against Vice President Sara Duterte.
Tanungin rin natin yung Senate of the 20th Congress kung are they willing to be bound by the actions of the previous it has to be established. It has to be established by the Senate, not by the impeachment court.
Senator Bato Dela Rosa plans to make a motion to the Senate's regular session to determine the willingness of the incoming Senate to continue with the impeachment. While the stand of each senator, especially newly elected ones, are yet to be counted, Senator Risa Hontiveros stands firm that the impeachment court's jurisdiction over the case is no longer for questioning.
Diba sinabi ng Korte Suprema na yung impeachment ay non-legislative function ng Senado. Sinabi din ng Korte Suprema na ang non-legislative functions ay hindi apektado ng legislative calendar. Ang impeachment trial court ay nagpapatuloy once nakapag-acquire ng jurisdiction hanggang sa madesisyon na namin yon sa pamamagitan ng boto na convict ba or acquit ba.
Contrary to De La Rosa's planned move, Hontiveros states that the impeachment court is expected to tackle first the answer ad cautelam filed by the Vice President, followed by the reply of House prosecutors. Should there be any motion to dismiss raised at the beginning of the court's reconvening, Hontiveros said she's ready for debate. On July 29, the Senate is expected to reconvene as impeachment court. Meanwhile, Senator Bam Aquino and Kiko Pangilinan are yet to confirm whether they will align to the Senate majority bloc. According to a statement posted by Pangilinan, talks are still underway and decisions are yet to be finalized. However, if the Kiko-Bam tandem does align with the Senate majority bloc, Senator Risa from the minority shared she wouldn't feel hurt.
I don't feel betrayed. Basta patuloy akong maninindigan and patuloy akong magtatrabaho. Hindi ko mamasamain dahil bawat isa sa amin gumagawa talaga ng desisyon sa bawat bagong kongreso ng Senado.
As for the former President Rodrigo Duterte, who is currently detained at the International Criminal Court's facility in The Hague, Netherlands, Senator Alan Peter Cayetano filed a resolution seeking the Philippine government to ask the ICC for the interim release of Duterte and be put under any form of house arrest. Mobile journalist Marymon Reyes, we are One News.
In other news, U.S. President Donald Trump slaps the Philippines with a 20% tariff despite ongoing trade talks. The hike hits 8 countries in total and could take effect as early as August 1. More details in this report.
The United States has imposed a 20% tariff on the Philippines, a move that comes even as trade talks remain underway. To put that in perspective, the 20% levy is 3 points higher than the 17% rate imposed on Liberation Day last April 2. And the Philippines is not alone. Japan, Malaysia, Brunei, and Brazil are among the countries also hit with increased import taxes. In a 2-page letter addressed to President Bongbong Marcos, which is identical to letters sent to other countries, Trump justified the duties, citing long-standing trade deficits. In 2024 alone, the U.S. trade deficit with the Philippines rose to nearly $5 billion, a 22% increase from the previous year. Unless a new deal is struck within 3 weeks, the 20% tariff takes effect on August 1st, and that's on top of other sectoral tariffs the U.S. will impose. Here at home, the Department of Trade and Industry confirms it has received the notice on the tariff hike. In a statement, Trade Secretary Cristina Roque expressed concern over the decision despite continuous engagements. Roque emphasized the 20% rate is the second lowest among other countries, but warned that unilateral trade actions could destabilize global supply chains. A Philippine delegation is scheduled to hold discussions in the U.S. next week, just days before the new rate takes effect. Since May, government officials have been negotiating with U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer. Leading the pack are Special Assistant to the President for Investment and Economic Affairs Frederick Go and Trade Secretary Cristina Roque, who initially sought to negotiate the rate down to zero.
We are concerned that the U.S. has decided to impose a 20% tariff on Philippine exports. The fact remains, however, that the 20% rate is the second lowest among all reciprocal tariffs that the U.S. has imposed on the region, the lowest being the 10% of Singapore. Myself, together with DTI Secretary Chris Roque and Undersecretary Perry Rodolfo and Undersecretary Alan Hepty, will be flying to the United States next week. This is actually a scheduled trip to the United States even before today's announcement. No? So there will be meetings next week amongst the trade representatives ng Amerika po at ng Pilipinas.
On Monday, Trump announced similar letters were sent to 14 nations in total, among them Japan and Malaysia, which received even higher tariffs compared to that issued in April. Trump once again defended his decision to charge steeper tariffs.
The formula was a formula based on common sense, based on deficits, based on how we've been treated over the years, and based on raw numbers. And we really haven't had too many complaints, because I'm keeping them at a very low number, very conservative, as you would say, number. And we haven't had, I'm sure they will be complaining at certain points, but we haven't had complaints. We've been treated very unfairly by both friend and foe.
To discuss this story, we're joined by Dr. John Paulo Rivera, a Senior Research Fellow. And thank you for joining us, Doctor.
Can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can hear you. Good morning, everyone.
Yes, thank you for joining us here on News and Views. Welcome to the show. All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Doc? Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's start off. No, in this new 20% U.S. tariff, no, how does this really affect Philippine exports?
Well, the U.S. decision to impose a 20% tariff on Philippine goods is a significant setback, particularly for our exporters, especially those in the sectors of electronics, garments, and agri-based products, which have a high volume of exports to the United States. And it actually raises the cost of Philippine goods in the U.S. market, and it actually threatens our competitiveness and potentially reducing our export earnings and job opportunities in key sectors, particularly those heavily participating in the export market.
Yeah, but di ba, mostly kasi yung in-export na ng Philippines, you mentioned electronics. Pag electronics,
Yes.
ang alam ko, Doc, no, not everything that we export are finished products, mostly components. Does this
Yeah.
affect then the finished product sa loob ng US? Kasi that's where they assemble it.
Well, it could, but that's why we're telling that the effect of the tariffs can be direct. It can also be indirect because, for example, we send the raw materials, for example, to Taiwan.
Yes.
And then Taiwan I believe Taiwan has a relatively higher, if I'm not mistaken, tariffs compared to the Philippines. So the Taiwanese export firms would have to levy an additional cost so that they will not be the one to shoulder the full effect of the tariff.
But before, last related to that, no? So in essence, Doc, it could also benefit the Philippines. Like for example, we're the lowest among most of the Asian countries. So let's say Taiwan, hypothetically, instead of sila magdadaan sa States, pwede nila idaan sa atin, and therefore yung export products will get the rate from the Philippines?
That's possible, and because the Philippines can actually take advantage of this low tariff in order for us to remain competitive, not necessarily with the United States, but with our other trading partners.
That's right.
Well, we all know that officials are now headed to Washington, no, to try and convince the U.S. to lower the tariff. Is there any realistic leverage the Philippines can use in the possible ongoing trade talks with the United States?
Well, it depends because the fact that from 17% to 20%, despite the negotiations, it still happened. So it's actually a wait-and-see scenario. But then the Philippines could actually continue leveraging on the economic and historical ties that we have with the United States, that we remain to be an economic partner, a viable economic partner, and at the same time, a diplomatic partner with the United States.
Pero sa forecast mo, Doc, ano nakikita mo kung sakasakali, pagbigyan tayo ng US, ilang percentage yung kaya nilang ibaba? Because nauna ng 17 tapos ngayon 20.
Well, perhaps given the current information that we have, given the current trends, the most optimistic would be to put back the Philippines at 17%.
17 pa rin. Okay.
Kasi Doc, if you take a look yung mga imports ng US, na sumisira sa local economy nila. Mostly it's electronics. You also have vehicle production, no? Because you have areas in the US from Detroit to other areas na ang baba na ng economy ng paggagawa ng industry ng paggagawa ng cars, and the Philippines essentially is not a threat to those products. No? So do you think among Asian nations might be a negative, but we stand to gain the most if these tariffs hold?
Well, if the tariffs hold, the Philippines could remain to be competitive, provided that we also expand our trade with other economies, particularly with our neighboring economies and other free trade areas that we have, rather than really focusing on our market with the United States.
What usually, Doc, what field or what products do we ang highest export natin sa US?
Well, it would really include, number one, electronics, agricultural products, and textiles. So these are mostly raw materials and work in progress. That's why the effect of the Trump tariffs would most likely or largely be indirect. But then the effect of this on, for example, on employment and on productivity in the Philippines would have to be felt by those working here in the Philippines.
Yun nga, I was gonna ask that, kasi nga, the economists natin are really alarmed regarding this 20% tariff na will be imposed on August 1 by the US. Pero what are the specific effects on this on jobs, consumers, industries per se, Doc?
Well, at the onset, this Trump tariffs could actually lead to lower export revenues. And lower export revenues would result to reduced factory activity here in the Philippines. And then it would now result to job losses, even weaker investor confidence, especially among those enterprises or firms here in the Philippines that are serving the global supply chain. So the first element or the first variable that would be affected here would be employment. Employment of those Filipinos working in export sector enterprises.
sinasabi kasi nila talagang they're really alarmed with this imposition ng tariff because majority of our trade kasi talaga US. So ang sinasabi ng iba ng mga economists and other people na this is a big challenge pero parang kumbaga lesson learned from the Philippines to explore more areas. 'Di ba? And magkaroon ng i-improve yung products and systems natin and to negotiate better trade deals. But where do we start, 'di ba? How do we start from that?
Well, again, given what's happening now, the immediate response that the Philippine government can do would continue the diplomatic engagement, high-level discussion with the US. Let's not surrender on that. And retaliation should never be part of the option because nobody wins in retaliation. But the most critical part here would be, and I would echo the findings of many other economists, let's emphasize on export diversification. Let's expand market access. And we have that. The Philippines is very active in many free trade areas, particularly the ASEAN Economic Community. The European Union trade agreements were part of the GSP Plus of the EU. And then we also have the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, and we can strengthen trade activities with Korea, China, Japan, Australia, even New Zealand, because we are a signatory to the RCEP. And by diversifying trade to our neighboring economies, we are actually protecting the Philippines from this kind of policy changes from the United States.
Pero Prof, Doc, you could see yung most of the stuff that we export, aside from mga bananas and agricultural products, you mentioned textiles, but in its raw form, tela. No? Do you think it's about high time that we explore the possibility of actually developing an industry that exports finished products naman? So para this time, di ba, may diversify also the kind of materials we export, diversify yung product list natin.
Well, that is a critical move for the Philippines, that it's high time, no, that rather than having bulk of our trade to be in raw materials and work in progress, finished product would be very valuable because it would now contribute greater to economic growth. And at the same time, we do not have to rely on just raw material exports, and then the demand, particularly of developing countries like in the EU, in the Middle East, in North Asia, in East Asia, their demand for our finished product would be good. And the value added of that production would be greater. And this will actually contribute to us speeding up our economic growth towards the upper middle income status.
Kasi daw karamihan nangyayari sa atin, it's a cycle. We export a finished product, the EU, some EU countries will pick it up, come up with a high-end, let's say, a jacket, a t-shirt, and it's exported back to the Philippines. And we buy it at a triple, times 4, times 5 of its price. So it's a lugi tayo sa export-import cycle.
No, that's why the Philippines would have to strengthen our comparative advantage, particularly in the areas of production, distribution, logistics, even labor costs. The efficiency of Filipino labor, the quality of our finished products would have to be established so that instead of other countries putting more value added, the value added that Filipino work has put into a product would already be sufficient for world trade.
Alright, sinasabi nila kasi, if you look at it on another perspective, ang Pilipinas naman ay isa sa mga mababang binigyan ng tariff imposition ng US. Pinakamababa Singapore, if I'm not mistaken, pangalawa tayo. And how should we take this? Dapat bang maging parang mas lax tayo on this na okay, mababa pa rin naman tayo sa ASEAN?
Actually, we should not. The Philippines should not rest its laurels. The fact that we are still classifying ourselves as those economies with a lower U.S. tariff. But for example, let's compare it with Vietnam. No? Looking at the recent tariff table, I believe Vietnam is also being imposed a 20% tariff. Even if it is equal, we have to look at other aspects, like for example, logistics. No? Who is more advanced in terms of logistics, in terms of distribution, in terms of technological application to finished products, to work in progress, and if suppose that the other economy is more advanced in that area, then they would have the comparative advantage that even if we have the same tariff rate, business would go to them rather than us. That's why it's a call. It's a wake-up call for us to start investing more into our technology, into our production capacities, and of course, into our ease of doing business. So that business would go to the Philippines regardless of the small margins in tariff differential with respect to other countries.
Widen our options, ika nga. But,
Exactly.
Oo, pero sabi nga nila, let's say for example, worst comes to worst, may implement na nga itong August 1 na 20%, sa August 1. When is the earliest the public might start feeling the effects of that tariff hike?
Well, the tariff hike we would not immediately feel the effects, but then we should be able to feel it in the coming few months or few quarters because of the import bills that we have, that these orders would have to be processed first, to be delivered first, and then the succeeding demand would have to be subjected to the tariff, which might take a few months.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you. I will keep in touch with you as this progresses.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, thank you, Dr. John Paulo Rivera, Senior Research Fellow, Philippine Institute for Development Studies.
Thank you so much for
Maraming
joining us
salamat
today.
po. Maraming salamat.
All right, in other news, a proposed measure in Congress seeks to boost national awareness of the Philippines' claims in the West Philippine Sea. House Bill 1625 would require schools to teach the 2016 arbitral ruling and the legal basis for Philippine jurisdiction over the West Philippine Sea in elementary and high school curricula. According to Akbayan Party List, the goal is to educate the youth and counter what it describes as pro-China propaganda. The group emphasized the importance of arming young Filipinos with facts about the country's maritime rights, especially amid China's continued assertions in the South China Sea. The WPS bloc is composed of Representatives Chel Jokno, Percy Sendanya, Dada Ismula, Laila de Lima, Kaka Bagao, and Crisel Lagman Luistro.
And to talk more about this proposed measure, we're joined by Akbayan Party List Representative Dada Ismula. Good morning, Congresswoman. Thanks for joining us today.
Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Magandang umaga po.
Okay,
Angelo.
Opo, pinag-uusapan pa po ito since yesterday, since the filing of this bill. Ano po ba ang naging inspirasyon ng inyong bloc to push for mandatory West Philippine Sea education sa ating curriculum or curricula?
Well, una, napakaraming nagkakalat na mga fake news. Ang pag-atake patungkol sa hindi totoo na atin ang West Philippine Sea. At doon ay ang pagtaboy rin sa ating mga mangingisda na siyang nangingisda doon sa karagatan sa West Philippine Sea. So, kagaya ko po, ako po ay isang Moro at IP, karamihan po sa aming komunidad. Ang kanilang pamumuhay po ay ang pangingisda. Kahit sa ang parte naman po ng ating bansa, wala naman po sigurong gusto ang maitaboy sa sariling karagatan.
Right.
Kung sa bill na ito po, as early as anong grade po ang nakalagay po na dapat ituro yung at least yung history ng West Philippine Sea tsaka yung mga any relevant facts about it?
Ito po ay ino-open or gusto po natin na maituro sa private and public sa primary and secondary schools. So, as early as bata pa lamang, gusto natin turuan na ang mga kabataan na malaman na ang West Philippine Sea ay tunay nga na atin.
But going into the specifics of this bill, Congresswoman, ano po ba yung mga topics na nakikita po nating importante na dapat masama po doon? Kasama po ba dyan, of course, yung 2016 arbitral ruling, etc.?
Ang gusto lamang po natin dito ay ma-include sa subject matter yung history, legal is and environmental, cultural, and economic significance of the sea.
But who will help po design the whole lesson plan? Of course, we have historians, kasama rin po ba ang mga diplomats dito, teachers, the specifics
Coast Guard.
Tungkol naman dito, ang Department of Education ay inaatasang mag-develop ng age-appropriate module at materials na may collaboration din itong required with the DFA, NHCP, at ang mga civil societies po natin.
Kung may nakipag-ugnayan na ba kayo sa mga ibang counterpart nyo sa Senado para if ever mapadali po ang pagpasa nitong bill, which I think naman is widely accepted even in the upper house.
Siyempre naman po, nariyan ang ating kapartido at kasama na si Senator Risa Hontiveros na siguradong kakampi at siguradong susuporta po sa ating ipinasang WPS bills.
When filing this bill yesterday, it was really well received by the public po, ano. But on the other side of the fence, like po dyan sa Congress, do you anticipate any opposition to this bill?
Kasalukuyan naman po, patuloy kaming nakikipag-reach out sa ibang mga kongresista sa House. Tayo po ay nakaka-receive ng mga feedback na ito po ay sinusuportahan nila.
Wala pa namang kumukontra politically and ideologically.
Kung ang tanong kasi ng iba, isasama niyo pa ba yung ibang claims natin sa ibang areas? Kasi aside from West Philippine Sea, meron pa tayong may Sabah area, meron parang may isasama ba kayong ibang parts pa ng Philippine territory?
Actually, naghain po kami ng resolution on Chinese Sister City Agreement.
Okay.
So, kalukuyan, ito po ay gusto natin ang DILG na investigahan ang mga Philippine LGUs and Chinese cities na that aims actually na i-require agreements na gusto nilang inimical to national security and interest natin.
Okay.
But Congresswoman, when your bloc was crafting this bill, were you able to consolidate or meet with other stakeholders sa West Philippine Sea, such as the fishermen, di ba po, the soldiers, yung mga deeply affected po with this territorial claim?
Opo, yan po ay pinangungunahan ng ating mga fisher folks. Kasama na ang mga fisher folks na naroroon nangingisda sa West Philippine Sea, ang ating mga fisher folks na nasa Zambales, although hindi man sila doon nangingisda sa West Philippine Sea, pero kagaya ng sinabi ko po kanina, saan mang bansa ay mayroon tayong mangingisda at lahat ay apektado. Isa po doon ay ang ating mga Philippine Coast Guard, nakakausap din po natin at nagbigay din po ng kanilang pahayag tungkol dito. So, during the drafting, mayroon po talagang ugnayan.
Ano po ba yung mga nakikita natin common mistakes or errors po kapag binabanggit ang West Philippine Sea? Na feeling po natin, yan din po yung nararamdaman ng mga stakeholders dyan na dapat po natin makorek through this bill.
Kasi ang laman lang naman ng bill na ito ay gusto natin ipahayag sa taong bayan, especially sa ating mga kabataan, na tunay nga na ang West Philippine Sea ay atin. Ang pagkakamali dito ay yung mga inilunsad or ipinahayag ng mga China or yung mga fake news na ipinahayag nila na hindi ito atin. At napaka-aggressive, napaka-active ng bansang China patungkol sa pag-claim din na kanila nga ito.
Yung sabihin na ito, kung tinuturo ba sa mga students if ever, kung ano yung sakop ng West Philippine Sea? Kasi ngayon ang dami kahit aminado, ibang news agencies also sometimes refer to yung West Philippine Sea area as South China Sea with regards pag naghahayag ng mga international news para maging streamlined na lahat. Kasi sa China, kung titignan mo news report sila, solid sila. All of them are saying South China Sea. So parang dito, should we reinforce then that everyone uniformly will say West Philippine Sea?
Yes po. Kasama po dito yung pagtuturo din na yung boundaries ng West Philippine Sea or boundaries ng Pilipinas, na alin lang ang boundaries natin or ang atin. Ito ay specific na ay kung ano lamang ang para sa Pilipinas. Nang sa gayon ay alam natin lahat na kung ano lamang din ang ating boundaries.
Well, lastly, Congresswoman, how do we make sure po na itong mapapasama sa mga eskwelahan po na pag-aaralan nila ay hindi po purely or just another memorization para po sa mga estudyante? How do we make sure that this is going to be a meaningful approach, 'di ba, doon po sa ating claim sa West Philippine Sea?
As soon as ang bill na po ito ay maaprubahan at maging isang batas, we will make sure that we will coordinate with the DepEd, with the DFA and the NHCP na even though meron ng usapan, pero gusto din po natin na i-make sure na kung ano po yung specific na nakalagay sa bill, yun din po lamang ang gagawin at hindi po siya yung memorization lang at i-make sure natin na ang pag-intindi ng bill na ito ay ipag-educate po talaga, pagpapaintindi sa kabataan na tunay nga na ang West Philippine Sea ay atin.
Ay, lastly na lang po, ano po ba to ang magiging siste po dito? Ipapasok po siya sa loob ng araling panlipunan, social studies, or stand-alone subject siya?
Sa gayon po ay it is a stand-alone. Ngunit inaatasan po din ng batas na ito na ang DepEd ay mag-include ng additional topics if it is deemed relevant po.
Alright.
Thank you for your time and insights, Representative Dada Ismula. Thank you again, Congresswoman, for joining us on the show.
Have a great weekend. Now, in other news, former Makati Mayor Abby Binay has defended her administration's controversial settlement deal on the city's subway project. Binay insisted the agreement with developer Infradev was valid and entered before her term ended. Under the deal, Makati would pay Infradev 8.96 billion pesos after the company pulled out following the transfer of 10 barangays to Taguig. This comes after her sister, now Makati Mayor Nancy Binay, called the agreement a midnight deal.
Masama ba na nagkaroon ng settlement? And you have to remember that my term ended June 30, 12 noon. Walang election ban. Walang post-election. May election ban, pero walang post-election ban. It doesn't mean that after May 12, you cannot enter into any transactions. Is it valid or not valid? It's valid. And it is not a midnight deal. Kasi hindi pa nga tapos.
She also said the city remains financially strong, claiming that she left behind 30 billion pesos in funds and 243 billion pesos in assets. The former mayor challenged her sister's administration to, quote, study first and stop undermining her legacy.
Kung tutuusin, pwede naman na i-withdraw nila yung settlement agreement na hindi na kailangan ilabas because technically confidential nga yung negotiation. Hindi nila kailangan madira ng kahit sino. I can only think of one thing. It is really to undermine my legacy. Mag-aral muna sila, magpapahinga muna ako. Magkita na lang kami after 3 years. Maaga pa.
Interesting ang away ng magkapatid na ito.
Binay versus Binay.
Binay versus Binay versus... Hindi, si Mayor Junjun din, di ba? Nakipag-away din sa kanila.
Kita-kits daw after 3 years.
Papahinga muna daw si former Mayor Abby.
Yes.
Ay, ako. Alright, don't go away because we're not done yet. Please stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching News and Views here on One News. Hindi po magic ang nangyari, di ba?
Yes, oo.
Ka na naman, tulala ka na naman.
Hindi, akala
Lagi
ko
ka na lang
sasabihin
ganyan.
mo yung breaking news.
No, we're joined by Buddha's Belly. As usual, every Friday,
Yes.
they provide food for us. So Marjorie of Buddha's Belly, thank you very
Thank
much,
you so much.
For sending us over.
But also, in another news, breaking news actually, meron pa daw pong ilang mga sako pa na tagpuan dyan sa Taal Lake sa ongoing search and retrieval operation ng PCG. Base nga pa rin yan doon sa sinasabing may mga bangkay na itinapon dyan sa Taal Lake. Yung mga
Pero
allegedly mga missing sabongeros.
But for context, we have yet to ascertain kung yung sakong nahanap
Kung ano yung laman ng sako.
Kung ano yung laman. Because
hindi pa natin
as we all know, madami naman tinatapon talaga sa Taal Lake. But as this news or story breaks, rest assured, we here at One News and Signal would update everyone regarding this developing story.
Now, in other news, authorities have arrested Tony Yang, brother of former presidential economic advisor Michael Yang, on charges of falsification of public documents, perjury, and violation of the alias law. He was apprehended on July 9 at the Presidential Anti-Organized Crime Commission's temporary facility in Pasay City. Yang had been using the alias Antonio Maestrado Lim to establish at least 12 companies across Cebu, Davao, and Cagayan de Oro. He was first intercepted at NAIA in 2024 for immigration violations, where authorities found fake IDs, firearm licenses, nearly 1.4 million pesos in cash and other contraband. In a Senate hearing, Yang also admitted to using a fraudulent birth certificate to pass as a Filipino citizen.
In sports, Alas Pilipinas men suffered their first loss in the 2025 CV League. The national team fell to Thailand in straight sets, 16-25, 22-25, 24-26 Thursday night in Candon City. Leo Ordiales, Budin, and Kennedy Batas tried to carry the team, but Thailand's final set surge proved too much. A costly service error at set point allowed Thailand to mount a comeback and complete the sweep. Alas now looks to regroup ahead of their next match against Cambodia.
Beauty creams sold online often promise surgery-free body enhancements, but doctors warn they're unproven, misleading, and potentially dangerous. Mobile journalist Yeda Pascual has the story.
Kapag may gusto baguhin sa katawan, may nabibili na raw para dyan online. Sa halip na magpa-opera, pwede raw na pahid-pahid lang. Effective naman kaya? Pantanggal ng cellulite o kaya pampalaki ng dibdib. Ilan ito sa mga claim ng ilang cream na mabibili online. Ang pangako pa nito, panigurado raw na tataas ang confidence dahil ma-achieve mo na ang gandang hindi mo inakala. Kaya naman, pumapatok ito.
Affordable or cheaper alternatives na pahid-pahid lang at hindi po kailangan mag-opera at hindi kailangan magpunta sa doktor, kaya pong bilhin online.
Oo nga naman. Sa halip na magpa-opera at gumastos ng ilang sessions para sa mga treatments, ito pahid-pahid na lang. Pero ang tanong, totoo ba talaga ang mga pangakong yan?
All these claims po are false because wala pong mga pag-aaral o pagsusuri that can prove na tama po yung mga claims na to.
Paano naman yung iba na may pa-before and after photos pa to prove na effective raw?
Pwede pong edited po yung before and after photos. Most of these creams po kasi may mga ingredients po that can cause irritation to the skin or cause slight redness and swelling of the skin.
At maliban sa sinabi ni Doc na may mga side effects na pwedeng makasama sa balat, pwede rin daw itong magdulot ng hormonal problem, lalo na kung ginagamit ito sa mga sensitibong parte ng katawan.
Namumula, namamaga po yung balat or namamaga po yung area na yon, to give the claim, so pwede pong ma-burn, ma-irritate. Because of this irritation, pwede rin po magkaroon ng inflammation and infection.
At dahil sa dami ng misinformation online, aminin ng iba ang daling mabudol. Kaya si Doc may paalala.
Genital enlargement, boob augmentation, or vaginal tightening, or even cellulite removal. Most of these indications po, kailangan po talaga ng pagkonsulta sa doktor para po mabigyan po kayo ng tamang payo. Also, check po FDA approved po yung mga binibili po nating topical products.
Na-enhance at nadagdagan nga ang confidence pero posibleng panandalian lang yan at ang ending perwisyo sa katawan. Kaya mas maganda pa rin na doktorang lapitan para sa huli, walang sisihan. Mobile Journal Yeda Pascual po. Hatid ang muka ng balita.
Mattel has launched its first Barbie with type 1 diabetes made in collaboration with Breakthrough T1D to raise awareness and foster inclusivity. The doll includes a glucose monitor, insulin pump, and tools for managing diabetes, offering realistic representation for kids with a condition. Mattel says the goal is to reflect real health journeys and help children see themselves in their toys. This new Barbie expands a lineup that already features dolls with disabilities, hearing aids, and various body types.
A 13-year-old Filipina is making a name for herself in the world of drifting, earning trophies abroad with her impressive driving skills. Para bigyan ng mukha ang balita, Mobile Journal, Ivan Tarique.
13 anyos pa lang, pero isang Filipina teen ang nakikipagsabayan na sa mga veteranong drifters sa international scene. Sa bilis ng kanyang sasakyan at liksi ng pagmaniobra, hindi mo akalaing nasa likod ng manibelang ito ay isang 13-year-old. Siya si Bella Cañete, Filipina teen sensation sa mundo ng drifting. Hindi man legally pinapayagan na magmaneho sa kalsada ng Pilipinas. Nasa Pro-Am category na siya sa mga international drifting competitions. Ibig sabihin, kasabay niya sa track ang mga professional drivers. At hindi lang siya basta-basta sumasali, siya ay nakakuha din ng mga tropeyo. Sa bawat kompetisyon, may baong gigil si Bella na manalo at karaniwang umuwi na may pasalubong na podium finish.
It feels very surreal. Of course, I cannot drive in highways and stuff, but I can only drive on drift circuits or normal car circuits.
Sa likod ni Bella ang kanyang supportive parents. Pera, oras at panalangin na ibinibigay nila sa ngalan ng pangarap ng anak. Lalo na't ilang beses na rin nakaengkwentro ng peligro sa track ang dalagita. Isang insidente ang naging dahilan para ilang buwan muna siyang magpahinga. Kaya sa kanyang pagsabak, ginawa ng kanyang magulang ang makakaya para maprotektahan pa rin ang anak.
Suit, gloves, helmet, tsaka enhanced device niya, all are FIA approved para merong fire protection. So at least, yun yung nagmi-mitigate doon sa risk na yun. So medyo kahit papano, kumakalma din yung heart mo.
Hindi rin madali ang aspetong pinansyal. Magastos dahil sa bawat training session. Umaabot sa 5,000 Singaporean dollars o kulang-kulang 220,000 pesos ang bayad ng kanyang mga magulang. Pero hindi nila ito titigil lalo't nakikita nilang malayo ang mararating ni Bella sa larangan na ito. At ang dream goal niya,
Dream is to make it to Formula Drift. That's my ultimate goal.
sa gitna ng kompetisyon na ito na male-dominated, sinong mag-aakala na mag-iiwan ng marka ang isang Pinay? At isang bagay ang tiyak, nagsisimula pa lang si Bella at mas marami pa siyang pwedeng patunayan. Mobile Journey Ivan Taringki po hatid. Amo ka na balita.
May reklamo ako dyan, ha?
Bakit?
Bakit walang Barbie Ken na may gout?
Wala pa. I-request natin.
Kasi disabilities dapat ilalagay nila may gout.
Merong Ken na may prosthetic leg.
Hindi. Dapat may Ken na may gout.
I-propose natin yan.
Propose natin. Kasi hindi kami marginalized. Madami kami may gout.
Yes, that's true.
That's true. May FB page kami na multi-country.
Maraming may gout.
Alright. May sabihin ka pa
Thank you
about
so
Barbie?
much kay Marjorie Tan ng Buddha's Belly for our spread today.
Alright. Happy weekend to everyone. And before we let you go, I'd like to leave everyone with a quote. Living with fear stops us from taking risks. And if you don't go out on the branch, you're never going to get the best fruit. A quote from Sarah Parrish. And that wraps up today's episode of News and Views.
Join us again on Monday. I'm Angelo Castro.
Monday? Tomorrow. And I'm Angelo Castro, the third year One News.
All sides, all the time.